So you need some tools. And the title of this is not accidental. So what I want you to do now and for the rest of your life is to think of teaching like your research. What would I do in my research in this classroom? And I guarantee you, you will always find the answer to your classroom, except your classroom may be more difficult than your research. I'm a plant ecologist. Plants don't move, they don't have families, they're perennials. Every year I go up there and I see them for, and they just say, "Hi Diane, nice to see you again." So my research on the tundra is way easier than my research with humans. So those of you who really do research on humans, I respect you immensely. All right, so some goals. Let me ask this question. So here's our warm-up question. What are the two most common kinds of assessments that faculty use and know how to do? Well, not necessarily know how to do, but faculty use. Two most common kinds of assessment. Melanie? Multiple choice and essay. Okay, and so what I want to do today with you is teach you two things that are not either of those, because those of us who, and it's all fun, based on the fact that I teach in the spring a very large enrollment biology course, and I've taught up to 800 students. Not ideal, but a reality in some places, and you never know what you're going to get when you go to your institution after you graduate from Michigan State. So we have to pay attention to this. So we're going to look at two kinds of assessments to really start assessing high cognitive level learning. Okay, that are not multiple choice or essay. All right, so does this sound good? You're loving it, okay. All right, so now this is my course framework table, all right? So we teach organismal and population biology, which is BS 160 something. 2, 1, 1, 2, 2, okay. And there's one of the course goals. Let's take a look. I just highlighted it, and if you can't read it, it says, use modeling and simulations to represent concepts and make predictions. Modeling and simulations, so we've got the concepts in there. And biologist as a scientist and as a social scientist, Melanie's a social scientist, you're always making predictions because you do that in your field, right? Okay, so that's it. And we might do, so when we get down to the daily class lesson, which you're also doing in there, this is a day on a little topic called antibiotic resistance, which is probably fairly important. And so here is the alignment of a daily learning objective. So they're going to use data to make claims about the variation, fitness, and selection in a bacteria experiment. Antibiotic resistance is important to all of us. And they're going to interpret a graph. Is a graph a model? Uh-huh. Okay, and about zones of inhibitions, and they're going to make predictions about antibiotic resistance. So am I aligned? Aligned. We got some content there. Don't forget, there is always content. We don't do alignment without content. So I got that, and so there we go. So I'm using modeling, which is a graph, and we're going to make predictions, and this is what they're going to do. So I'm aligned. Okay, now we need some tools. Okay, so tools. So remember, we're doing this, and I really appreciate everything that Larry said because I'm going to dovetail onto this. This is the old way, or you can walk around this room. Come through this hallway someday when classes are in and look at the beady eyes sitting here and in the next one and in the next one, and you will be very depressed when you actually see what's going on. But this is our class. Sorry. This is our classroom. So we are teaching to the test in our classroom. This is Fee 100, which is the most abysmal excuse for a classroom on campus. It's in vet med across from plant biology, but we won't let things like that stop us. So these are our students, 500 people in this particular course, and I am teaching to the test very explicitly, Larry. Because when you're making models or doing arguments, you better learn how to make models and do arguments so that you can do them. All right, so that's the context. We have my goals and learning objectives, and here we go. So modeling. So let's talk about, we have to teach my students how to make a model. And I'm going to show you, we can practice lots of different kinds of models. I'm going to show you some of the artifacts that my students provide. But standard model, and again, we don't do anything unless it has a theoretical basis in our teaching. In your research, do any of you do anything that's not theoretically based? Or some of you may be trying to derive a theory, which is a good thing as well. So anybody here doing research that's not theoretically based? Faith-based research? Okay, all right. So therefore, when you're teaching, we got to have a theory or we don't do it. And if we don't have a theory, we can invent it. But we haven't invented anything yet. Nothing, unfortunately. I have no theories named after me, just a plant. All right, so what we have is Gould. Ashok Gould is from Georgia Tech. He's a computer scientist. And so if, in fact, a model, this is a simple box and arrow model, and this is not a concept map, and I'll tell you what the difference is because there are lots of books written about concept maps, but this is not. And so we have three concepts in there: chromosome, genes, and DNA, okay? Whether or not you know anything about those are pretty darn important in biology, okay? And they're related, and so we actually call chromosomes, DNA, we call them structures. All right, so they're concepts, traits, those are structures. Our students can do this. And then the relationship between structures is how they're related. Making connections is a real important outcome of our students. You've got to connect this to this and this to this within a course and hopefully between and among courses. All right? So now the relationships is how chromosome is related to a gene in this very simple model. And believe it or not, we have kids running around saying, what's bigger, a gene or a chromosome? And those of you who are not biologists might not know that either. But you all have genes and you all have chromosomes. And so you've got to make these relationships and put those relationships on the arrow. So how is family, Eric, related to institutions? Depending on the context, you would find that. All right? Then the next part is the function. All models have a function. Okay? And you can describe the function in a figure legend. Okay, how many of you make figures for your thesis? Tables. All right, and what are those representing? All your data. You do this. And when you get results, the first thing that we do in science, and I don't know exactly how you do it, man, we get those figures ready. Here are the results. The data, you build your figures, which have structures, behaviors, and we write the figure legend. Do you think this is important for our students at Michigan State to do? When should they start doing it? Third grade? Second grade? First grade? Okay. So modeling then is that. So here's an artifact of this. Now, what do we do actively in that 500-person room at Fee Hall? Okay, we practice making models in the context of the content. And so my students, if you were in our group yesterday, we use carbonless paper. If the other group, Melissa, who are the other group leaders? Do you use carbonless paper, Nancy? Could you tell them?
I don't use a lot of paper.
Okay, and the other, what's the other group? Your group?
Yes.
You can tell them about carbonless paper? It's a tool.
Yes.
So when they're making these models in class about a problem, they're doing them, I didn't bring it over, I can go get it at lunch, on carbonless paper. And then, Melanie, they rip it off, and at the end of every day of class, I have an artifact of what they did in class.
I don't know what you mean by carbon.
Yeah, I know. We'll get it. Would you mind getting it? Would you mind running over and getting it? Would you mind running over? Yeah, it's over. It's on the file cabinet by my desk. Do you have your keys? Yep. Thanks, John. Okay. John knows all this stuff. Okay, so there's a model. So let's put this into practice. So you practice this stuff. I'll show you the tool. Why models? And now I'll give you the theoretical basis besides Gould. Okay. Scientists build and test models. I would argue political scientists do. I would argue humanists who write books have to do their storyboard and make connections. Otherwise, your writing is gobbledygook. Anybody excused from this? No. Okay, good. All right. You're forced to make connections. One of the problems that we have is you teach more in your career, you'll see, well, didn't you learn that in the previous course? No, it's in the previous course, and I haven't made the connection to the new one. It's an alternative assessment in large classes and small classes. All right, so it's not multiple choice, it's not essay, it's gradable with large numbers, but it's much more revealing in our research. and it captures students' thinking. So the students have to make a discussion about what concepts do I put in there, okay? What are the relationships among those concepts? How do you organize these things? And the choice of words to link two concepts, institution and family, and whatever problem you're doing, they have to make institution is not family. There's some sort of link based on the context of what you're teaching, your goals. All right. And what this is called in science is systems thinking. So any of you who are scientists in there, does anybody not think that science is about systems thinking these days? It's your research. We're all systems thinkers. Okay? And we also know, we have another thing. I told you we don't do anything just because we think it feels good. In the vision and change for biology in the 21st century, one of the big areas is scientific literacy for majors and non-majors alike. It's all about systems thinking is one of the big deals we have to do. So we're cool on the research. Okay, so now I'll show you how this applies. Here you are seeing the final exam for the real final exam for BS 162. Okay, so hundreds of students took this common final exam, and you're not going to see it in detail, obviously. But it's a case study about wolves on Isle Royale. And if you've been paying attention to the news lately, we're down to 8 wolves, and then we're saying, well, we're going to have a wolf hunting season in Michigan, and the Michigan militia's out there, and everybody else, I mean, whatever's going on. I don't know what's going on, but this is real biology here, right? This is real biology. So we give students a case they've never seen before. All right, and there's more reading to this, but we talk about the wolves and the moose and the project, and then we ask questions about genetics, ecology, and evolution, because guess what? That's our course. We're supposed to do genetics, ecology, and evolution. All right? So here's the question about evolution. So what is very interesting about this is that, I'm going to go back one slide here. What you may or may not be able to discern from this, a real interesting case is that some of the wolves up in Isle Royale have malformed vertebrae. All right, and they think it's a genetic malformation. So that's important. You got normal wolves and malformed wolves. This is, I mean, it's all biology, but in population biology, but that's really important. So now the question about evolution is that they have to do a box and arrow model. We tell them in this case what kind of model they must do. I'll show you other kinds of models. And they have to incorporate the genetic underpinnings and evolutionary consequences of normal and malformed vertebrae wolves. So we have 2 kinds of wolves, normal and ones that have a problem with their neck. And if you can imagine being a wolf with a wolf, you may have some issues here, right, in terms of predation, okay? And so now here are the functions of the model. Remember, all models have function. Every table and graph you've ever made has a function. All right, so origin of genetic variation. That's a big idea in biology, right? The relationship between genetic variation and phenotypic. I won't get into the details here for those of you who are not biologists. And the consequence of phenotypic variation. So use the following structures. In this case, it's a final exam. We're telling them what they have to use. Okay? And you can use the structures. So allele, gene, DNA, protein, phenotype, nucleotide. Not multiple choice, saying match the gene with the allele in the thing. Now they got to model this system because they have to talk about a contextual thing, the evolutionary consequences to a real biological issue. I think this is kind of a big idea that we have to deal with in biology. You know, what are the evolutionary consequences of GMO in your diet? All right, so let's see what they did. So I'll show you some data, right? So now I'm going to show you what my kitty winkies did. And there's one. Now I want you to not just notice the structure of the model, because we have 2 things. We have a normal and a malformed vertebrae. So for the sake of just, here's the gene, but look, it bifurcates. So you have a normal pathway and an abnormal pathway to explain the fitness, okay? So we're not going to analyze it, but I want to look at the structure of the models. This is gradable, by the way, very easily gradable. Next one. There's another model of another student's, okay? So this is another structure. I just want to show you, it bifurcates. Here we have the alleles, and then it goes this way for normal phenotype, and it goes this way for malformed, and they're getting their biology right. All right? Next one. There's another one. Now here's the addition of the figure legend. So now here is an exam question with 300 students who are addressing this, and we now have a model to see that we score against a rubric. Okay? The rubric is posted after the exam so students can compare what their score is on the model with this. This is a final exam, so we don't do it on the final, but we do it on the midterm because they practice this. So again, you can see where we have a lot of information here about students thinking about some really important. Is there low-level Bloom's cognition in this problem? Any low-level Bloom's? Becky?
Sure, they've got to know what all those different
They got to
structures
know
are.
the terminoids. If you don't know the terminoids, you can't do the problem. So that's why yesterday I was saying the nested Blooms is really important. It's not first memorize all the terms and then keep memorizing all the terms, and then when you're senior, we'll give you a cool problem. That's the problem with our system. Give them the cool problem, and they will learn the terms. Okay, and that's what we do. That's what you're doing, because you're graduate students. Okay, so that's the addition to the figure legend. Okay, another question: carbon cycle. Who thinks that's unimportant in your life? Anybody? Anybody? On Isle Royale, the remains of a dead wolf. So we're still in the same test. Create a model. So a drawing, in this case, I've said you can make a drawing if you'd like, or a box and arrow, that explains how carbon from the body of a wolf can become part of a cell in a moose. Lots of biology in there. Note, moose do not eat wolves. All right, this is because a student wrote this once and we had to redo the exam, Melanie, so this is, yeah, well, that's easy. The moose digs up the wolf, we got it, carbon, carbon. Oh, you know, students are way, 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 way smarter than you think. Okay, all right, next, so there it is. Look, a carbon cycle. Just look at the structure of the model again. What do we've got going there? A cycle. Okay? That's really important, and I won't go through the biology, but you can see, so we've got energy and cycles. Here's a problem. Is there a cycle in that model for the same question, same course, same thing? No, we got a problem because there's no cycle, but we also have a major biological problem, which is one of the things we're concerned about, is that carbon's going up through the roots. We're not getting carbon in the plants through the air. But it's revealing this student's thinking. I mean, yeah, we don't get them all. We try. But this is very revealing as an assessment artifact that you get on there. All right? So there's another kind of model that the students do. Okay, then in the same exam, just before we wrote it, this article came out in Ecological Letters, by the way, which is a high impact journal, if any of you are ecologists here, a really high ISI rating. But our students can deal with it. So what we have to do, what we did, it's really cool because it's osteoarthritis. And that's really cool because we have a whole bunch of pre-meds and everybody gets arthritis. And so they like it. And so we had them do something with the first paragraph of this article, and here was the question, the assessment question. Create a graph that illustrates the relationship between the length of the metatarsal bone and incidence of osteoarthritis in moose. They had to, remember, what was my goal? Prediction. Now, they don't have the data for this paper. They have to do the graph that we all make in the air all the time. It's a model. It's a final exam question. Can my kids read this? Absolutely. Can they make a prediction? So let's see what they did. Whoop, there we go. Piece of evidence. How long does it take to grade 300 of these? My undergraduates grade this one because I have really good undergraduates, and with a rubric, you're fine, right? So students are making a prediction. So we've got higher level thinking, I claim, with assessments that are much more meaningful and interesting. We had kids doing pump fists after this exam. They thought, this is the coolest butt thing you've ever seen. 2 hours of final, and they're going, wow, that was fun. All right, so then they do on the same exam, they do genetics models. Those are models as well. And because we do this because students have real problems illustrating chromosomes, genes, DNA, and this is another thing. So again, more models. Again, another kind of assessment with large numbers of students that's not fill in the bubble. But guess what? We teach learning how to draw chromosomes. Because most kids, anybody here biologist, how do you think most kids draw a chromosome when you ask them for the first time? Thank you, Cheryl. They do this, I go, where did that come from? And then they said, my teacher in high school. I said, aha, where did your teacher go to school? Right here. I said, it's our fault. I never blame teachers. It's our fault. They went to school here or wherever they went to school. So I'm all for teachers. All right, so yeah, more models. Next one. All right, so that's models. So one of the things you might want to think about, and you can make models in political science, and you can make all sorts of, think about a model as an alternative form to an essay. They have to have structures, behaviors, and they have to have a function, which is a figure legend. Every time my kids in class draw, or on a test, draw a model, they must write a figure legend. How good do you think our students get at writing figure legends by the end of the course? Pretty darn good. How important do you think that is? Pretty darn important. So have them write figure legends. This is not a problem. Next one, argument models. How many of you know Tolman's argument model? Okay, and I was thinking about this when some of you were asking your questions about defending things. So again, we teach our students as part of the active learning how to structure arguments. So again, it's claims, evidence, and warrants. All right, so students are always making claims. Textbooks do nothing but make claims. Occasionally they give evidence. All right, so basically, and there is a wonderful book that I think every kid at MSU ought to have. It's called The Craft of Research. It goes across disciplines. It's $12. All of my students have to have this. Every MSU student ought to have this one because Booth and his colleagues argue throughout this book across disciplines. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. All right, so you have an argument model, and so students can write claims. This is one way of sorting out a big, long essay question. And I'll show you an example. Then what's the evidence? Because then your citations, what is your name in the striped shirt with the, yeah?
Me, Leanne.
Leanne, you're talking about, do you have them write 11 citations in your rubric or 5? It all depends on the quality. Do those citations support the claim? They may even only need 2, because those are the best citations. Or they might, depending on what the nature of the assessment is. So the evidence and then the warrants, what's the reason for the claim? So in science, claims or warranted evidence can be, it's theoretically based. You've got evolution as a theory that supports your evidence. Statistics supports our evidence. All right, so there's an argument. So if we're doing something about Asian carp in the Great Lakes, the claim is, and it's in the newspaper, and this comes from the popular media, right? Everybody says to Illinois, close the locks. So the stupid DNA doesn't get into Lake Michigan, and the evidence is somebody's found DNA for the Asian carp in Lake Michigan. Okay, that's the evidence, and you can write a citation for that. And why is it warranted? Because we know the biology of Asian carp. They're a top-level predator. Okay, so that means, we got problems here in Michigan City, right? All right, so students can do these things, and so let's see what that tool looked like on our final exam. Okay, so we're back to the moose and Isle Royale problem. And you won't be able to see that, but it's the argument model. So here it is, and we're talking about in this population. Now we've brought mosquitoes onto Isle Royale because they're there. All right, and we're making a claim that the population of mosquitoes, because mosquitoes are DDT resistant, many of them were, between 1950 and 2000, stake the claim, evidence, and warrants. Okay, so this is contextual to the big case. So now the students have to write the claim, the evidence, the warrants. That's a lot easier to grade than tell me all about evolution of mosquitoes, right, on Isle Royale. Now, we're doing some research about saying, does it hurt the students when they chunk it out that way? But as Larry said, we got time issues, right? So we want students to get it straight. What's your claim, what's your evidence, what's your warrants? And so now that's on a final exam. So 2 tools, models and argument, that are not essays, that can get at a lot of your learning goals. So, okay. There's the thing. So let me do a Bloom's. We analyze all of our assessment items by Bloom's. Okay, that's what is meaningful to our course. And so this was last term, not this one, a year ago. All right, and we had no level ones bloom, but already Becky said they got to know all those terms to do all this work anyhow, right? So it's silly to waste our time. So we had 6 items that were comprehension, and that was the mean score with the standard error of that. So you can see there's not much variation in there. And this is you just multiply the number of students times the number of items, and that's why you get these big numbers, okay? But look at this. This is application, just so you know. We had 8 application items. Look at the mean performance. You think that's grade inflation? I mean, you are our peer reviewers, by the way. My colleagues are the peer reviewers of my students. You got to lay it out there. All right? Here's the analysis. So we had 3 analysis items. Goes down a little bit there, but you know they're hitting. And then you could compare how we graded those to the rubrics and decided if we were foo-foo or not. They're right out there, peer review. Is peer review important in your field? Uh-huh. So we changed the peer reviewers, and that's how they performed. Okay, we're done. All right.